Morning, George.
Hey, good morning.
And everybody watching this morning, this is Saturday Morning Coffee with George and Phil. 22 minutes to help you become the best version of yourself. Whether you found yourself out of shape and need to get focused, unemployed and in transition, or just know that there's something you are called to do, we are your hosts, George Murray, Phil Connor. Our goal is to help you move from where you are today to where you want to be tomorrow. And we're glad you could join us early on a Saturday morning. Now, we only have 21 minutes or so left, so let's get started. Actually, before we do, George, we had a few folks ask us, why do you do this show? And I thought maybe we could take a moment and explain why two guys with successful professional careers, you running a global operations team for a large manufacturer and myself leading business development for an industrial services company, why we are doing a show about job transition. And if I may, I'll share my thoughts, and then maybe you could build on that.
Sure, I think it's a great idea. So while we're sharing coffee this morning, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I like you, George, and you're a great guy. That's why I like doing it. But seriously, I think it's a way that I know I'm equipped to help people. This past year we saw a lot of turmoil, people suffering. It's easy to feel helpless. And I didn't like that feeling. I wanted to help people get back on their feet and encourage them, as you say, to get better. You and I connected in your transformation group, and I felt aligned with what you were doing there and helping people in job search. And I think that, as we both discussed, there's people needing a lot of different kinds of assistance right now, and there are people called to help in different ways. And I just like that we're two guys that have some shared experiences that might be able to help folks. And this is a great way to help our brothers and sisters in need.
I absolutely agree. Being into career transition, even before the pandemic and an unemployment rate of 4.3%, it was still a challenge. So I can't imagine now. I'm just reading a recent article on LinkedIn, not only do we have 10 million people in career transition, but we have 64% of the people that are in jobs actually considering looking for another job, right? So there's a lot of competition. And this is just one way to help people really give back as to what of our experience, what's been the best practices, what's not been.
So you're not doing it for the glory and the multi-million-dollar speaking gigs?
Yeah, I wish. I haven't seen any of those yet.
Though you probably wouldn't turn them down if I know I wouldn't.
Absolutely not. I'd like to turn on and be talking in front of people.
George, I appreciate you very much. I think our viewers do as well. We have many people out joining us so far this morning.
Yeah, we have welcome Lisa Fraga, Jane Matsfield, Rob Sink. Appreciate you guys logging in this early morning, just before Easter. By the way, happy Easter to everybody out there.
That's great. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And we certainly ask, if you enjoy this episode today, that you share it with others. As soon as we're done, it's going to post out on LinkedIn, and we'd love it if you'd share it with your friends or anybody that you know that might be going through transition. And today, George, we thought we'd talk about the dark side of job search and how maybe we can help folks deal with rejection.
Absolutely. I think one of our discussions, you stated it best. You put so much effort, it's almost like, what's the words that you had stated? It's kind of like, help me here.
Well, it's kind of like a grieving process sometimes. And
bingo.
I think you get so emotionally invested as you research a company, you network with people to learn more about their culture, and then for whatever reason falls short, it can be very depressing.
I agree. I mean, believe me, I've actually experienced a lot of professionals who've gone down that path of building up their momentum and networking that kind of slows off because their interviewing takes off. And before you know it, they're in 3 or 4 interviews and they have a high chance at least one's going to come through. And ironically enough, within a couple of days, they all go through. And, you just kind of fall back to kind of a lost stage.
Well, and we probably want to remind our viewers, we're not in the professionals by any stretch in the area of depression, right?
No, absolutely not. If you've experienced this more than a couple of days, you should seek medical advice.
But I think the thing that we can help people with is realizing that focus on the value you're going to bring, and realize that for me, I realize rejection is not about me as a person. It's not a judgment of my personal value, but getting rejected or not getting a job is just realizing a lack of alignment between what the hiring manager is looking for and how I positioned myself. If I'm truly a strong candidate, not getting a job is an opportunity to improve how I represent my experience and the ability I can make an impact on an organization.
No, absolutely. I think Kathleen Crandall says it best. What makes you unique and different? Why do people come to you? I think part of that process is evaluating in the interviewing process. And sometimes, it might just come down to the fact that, today I wore a red tie and the person who wore a blue tie was the one that actually got selected.
Absolutely true. No, I agree with Kathleen. Kathleen does a really good job of helping people understand what happens because of them. And I often kind of fall back on that too, is that, it's really understanding the situation in strategic circles. I think they call it situational awareness, whether it's the color of the tie or maybe they need somebody that's really adept at a certain skill set and you just forgot to talk about it during the course of the interview. And I've not always been really great at doing this or being situationally aware myself.
No, great. That's one of the things is that we talked about it before. Personal board of advisors is so important because you get 3 to 5 people that are from different industries, different professions that can help you in many ways. One is really kind of evaluating, what are you doing well at? What are you not doing so well at? Critically important to turn around, not just in career transition, but in career in general. When you've landed and you will land, is having those people to turn around, bounce off ideas prior to maybe moving in a direction that might not be so positive.
No, and George, I'd say this is something that you've done a fantastic job of realizing, where you had skill gaps and sought out people that could coach or mentor you, even in the art of networking, right? I mean, a lot of people look at you as being an uber networker, but that hasn't always been the case. There were people that helped you in that journey.
Absolutely. Speak of the devil, we've got Lenny Newman, the master networker.
Morning, Lenny.
Hey, good morning, Phil. Morning, George. Happy Saturday to you and all the folks out there.
Thanks for joining us with Coffee with George and Phil.
It's a pleasure to be live with you guys. I watch you from afar pretty much at least every other week, so it's nice to be part of the show.
Appreciate that. So, one of the things we're talking about, as you well aware, is that deal of rejection. And Lenny, you've been on that receiving discussion with me many times. What have you been your experience as far as dealing with rejection, the best ways to handle that with all the people that you network still even today?
Well, I think there's a couple things when I started thinking about, the word rejection, and, quite frankly, it has a negative connotation. I think about a couple of different situations I've been involved with. One, 18 years ago, I was fired for the first time in a position as a CFO. And quite frankly, that is a form of rejection, right? They're saying, hey, for whatever reason, we no longer want you to be, the CFO. That was the first time I dealt with it. And I will tell you, it was a very, very challenging time for me personally. It probably took me a good 3 to 4 months to get over. I think, Phil, you mentioned it earlier, the whole grieving process. So that's one form of rejection that I've experienced. And quite honestly, for me, what I did is I leaned into my network and other people to help kind of pull me out of the slump, so to speak. And people were phenomenally supportive. There's people who will be more than happy to help and talk. As I like to say, basically, stepping back from the cliff hey, it's going to be okay. Lean into your network and begin talking with people. I just had another situation about 6 months ago. My last CFO job was eliminated. I mean, COVID elimination, another form of rejection. I will tell you the difference between the first time it happened to me and this most recent time. The primary difference was I had a phenomenal network. People who I know and like and trust were there to kind of pick me up and help me and support me. And it was really, really terrific. The third situation that I'll allude to is rejection when you're applying for jobs, which I think, Phil, you mentioned that is your lead in. The best advice I can give when you don't get chosen, I don't like to use the word rejection. I'd rather use they didn't choose you as opposed to they rejected you. I always advise people to do their best to try to find out what was it that you could have done differently that might have changed the outcome. If you can get that information, that can help you for future searches and future opportunities. So trying to learn from everything along the way, that's how I advise people. And then the last comment I'll make is, regardless of whether you have 2 or 3 or 4 things in the hopper, and I think, George, you would agree with this, and I'm sure, Phil, you would as well, regardless of how many things look promising and are in the hopper, you have to do 3 things. You got to keep your foot on the gas at all times. You got to continue to network. And then when in doubt, if those first 2 things aren't, in your wheelhouse, wash, rinse, repeat. Just do the same thing over and over again. So foot on the gas, network, and wash, rinse, repeat.
Lenny, that's such
I
good
agree.
advice.
One of the things that I see a lot about people. Go ahead, Phil.
No, go ahead, George.
No, what I was getting ready to say is that what I find too many times is people are building up the momentum in their networking, and they'll slow down. And as they're interviewing, and guess what happens? It takes them anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks to really build up that pipeline when we get to that point where we're not selected, right? And so it's really important to turn around and tell people to do it all the way beyond the first week, right? Because you don't know when you selected that opportunity, it might be this that you thought of, and the opportunity is way over here, and it's like, then you're going to have to start that whole process up again. So it's really important for you to do that. And when you do land, and you all will land, is making sure that you do network at least 2 to 3. I do a lot more than that, but do 2 or 3 a week, or 3 or 4 a month. Just make sure that you're keeping your network alive.
It's critical, and I think all 3 of us are in agreement there. But Lenny, since we have you, before you go, I'd really like you to talk a little bit about. You've shared with both George and I over the years this idea of tugs. And the reason I think it'd be valuable for you to share with our viewers what that is and how you think it's important for people that are going through rejection is that we often will hear people talk about how, I'm networking, but they're not helping me get a job. So I'm not finding benefit in networking. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Happy to. For those of you who aren't aware, tugs, it's not something that I invented. I don't own the label. Our mutual friend and network connection, Ann Pryor, refers to tugs, which are takers and users, givers and sharers. And I think all of us would agree when we're networking, it's pretty easy to spot the people who are takers and users. In other words, what we're saying is they're not reciprocal. They're not viewing networking as a 2-way street. The one thing that I'll share, and I've been a fairly consistent networker since late 2011, 2012. The one thing I try to accomplish in all my networking discussions is I always offer to go first, meaning, George, tell me, who is it you're looking to meet? How can I help you? What problem are you trying to solve that I can plug in people in my network to help you solve your problem? And I always go first. And quite frankly, oftentimes, most times people will at least ask the question, how can I help you? Which is a wonderful question. But many times they don't. And I have to tell you, the people who aren't willing to share, and it doesn't need to be a 1-for-1, you just need to get an idea that they're willing to share when they are able to share. I mean, we've all been there, George. I was no different than you back in 2011, 2012, attempting to build a network. I was clueless. Today, I'm fortunate. I've built my network to, literally over 1,500 people who I know, like, and trust. And that's a wonderful, wonderful network. So those are my thoughts. You want to avoid being a taker and a user, and you want to aspire to be a giver and a sharer.
Excellent advice. No,
Absolutely.
you mentioned that you have had a role that was eliminated with the pandemic, and as people are navigating this kind of unique time, is there anything specific that you have found beneficial with you as far as networking differently now during the pandemic than maybe before the pandemic?
Well, first of all, it's a great question, Phil. And one of the things that I have experienced over the last 15 months, I think my networking has become more efficient. And the reason I think it's become more efficient, as opposed to having to spend 10, 15, 20 minutes driving to and or from a networking meeting, I schedule 30-minute networking meetings. So I'm able to literally have 2 networking meetings in an hour, 30 minutes each, with no drive time. So I can tell you from my perspective, my networking, I think, has become more efficient, and specifically as it relates to people in transition. Generally speaking, when I confirm an introductory meeting for someone who has reached out to me, I usually send a 2 or 3 point bullet point agenda. These are the 3 things I want to cover in our initial meeting. And that keeps everything really scripted and on schedule. And I literally spend the first half of the 30 minutes covering what I'd like to cover and learn. And I leave the last 10 or 15 minutes for comments, feedback, or questions. So I become more efficient, in my opinion, Phil.
Well, and I love setting it up for what you want to learn and what you want to, because it goes back to how can you help the other person.
Correct.
And I know George will want to weigh on this too, but the visual that I try to remind myself of is a classic farming analogy, right? If you want your networking to provide a harvest, it's going to require you to sow the fields. You need to be patient. You can't rush the harvest. You can't expect to show up on day one and harvest the corn. It's going to take some time, and you need to invest in it.
And I love the analogy. And the only thing I would add to that, Phil, you got to water the fields. And when I say water the fields, it's not just water it on the first time you meet, but you water the fields in 3 months or in 6 months. So you need to continue to stay connected with people in your network.
That makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. Well, Lenny, we appreciate your time today. We'll see you in the next couple of days. As a matter of fact, are we still on for tomorrow on our weekly call?
Absolutely. Sunday morning coffee with Lenny and George. Phil, you're welcome to join if we need a guest.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Lenny. Have a great Easter.
Hey, thanks.
All right. So, Phil, we got a few more minutes. One of the things that talking about is that the higher up you go in your profession, whether you start off as a supervisor and you move up the ranks, it's so much more important to make sure that you're networking, not only in your organization but outside your organization. I met a gentleman probably about 6 months ago where was just struggling, didn't really see any upward mobility in his division, working for a large organization, and he was just ready to jump. He'd been with the company for a number of years. And I said, well, who do you know outside of the division and so forth? Reach out to that. Long story short, he was able to find an opportunity that lifted him up a little bit level as far as his salary and his title, and he stayed with the organization. So not just networking outside, but also networking inside the organization. We tend not to do those things.
It's incredibly valuable. It's a great ad. And I think that another visual that helps me get through the process a little bit that I took away from was a book on the 1980 U.S. Olympic rowing team, David Haberstam, and it was about the fact that you have to enjoy the rowing was what this theme of one of the sections of the book. And I think with job search, it's a grind. It's going to take time, and especially the higher the level of a role you have in an organization, because there's fewer chairs when the music stops, right? So you've got to enjoy the grind. You've got to find a way to enjoy the networking, enjoying the process, getting some excitement out of the few wins that you get, and how you're improving your self-awareness and improving your skill sets as you go through the process.
Yeah, to me, the transition, even if you're in a role and you're looking to transition out, or if you're full blown in a job transition looking for that next opportunity, I always talked about it in previous comments or sessions, is that, you have to track, like you stated, you have to evaluate, do a SWOT analysis, what's working for you, what's not working for you. And then it's also a time, you said it earlier, for self-reflection. What are the things that I want to adjust and change? I've actually met a lot of executives that have, CEOs, CFOs, and said, you know what? The first thing I don't want to do is go back to what I did, right? That CFO job. I mean, Lenny was on here. I mean, he did a total 180. I mean, the guy was a CFO for a number of years, and he wanted to leverage what he's learned over his last 10 years, networking and everything else, to go into business development. And I know he's going to be phenomenal at it, right? So I think you really need to look at an opportunity to say, hey, it's a transformation. It's not really a transition. It's an opportunity that I can get better than who I was yesterday or last year.
Oh, that's great advice. And George, I know we're running tight on time. If you could boil it down to 3 things our viewers could do to get better in recovering from rejection. Let me start over again. If you could boil it down to 3 things that they could do to get better in recovering from rejection, what do you think they would be?
Well, first of all, Rob does ask, what is the name of the book, the rowing book that you referenced?
Oh, great point, Rob. I didn't mention that. It's called The Amateurs by David Haberstam. Fantastic book. Highly recommend it.
Nice, good. So what I would say is the first one is visualize the impact that you will make. The second one is creating new patterns of behavior. That's one of the things that I looked at in the mirror after 3 months of my first career transition. I said, hey, wait a minute. There's a lot of things that are outside of my control, but you know what? I can start to eat, sleep, and kind of, a workout program in. I mean, you don't have to go out and start running a marathon. For me, I would have had a heart attack, right? Said that before. But start something, right? And what you'll do is it'll actually help build that confidence that you're going to need, especially in career transition. And then the final one is establishing expectations. To me, especially in my second career transition, I said, I'm going to find a job in 6 months. Ironically, I did, but what that timeline did is it helped me compress things. When I got closer, there are certain things that I would have not necessarily tried that I did, because I was like, hey, at this point, my timeline is coming to an end. This is what my expectation was. Now, granted, if you don't have a timeline, you could be like I was, 13 months and kind of just hoping for the best. But it is going to force you to do different things, and you're going to listen to people and try things you might not have.
No, great point. Maybe throw the slides up there. We can talk a little bit about, first and foremost, remember, folks, if you found what we talked about today to be beneficial, please share it with folks in your network. If you know there's somebody in transition, please share it.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank Lenny Newman for spending a few minutes in our virtual coffee pass by here every other Saturday. Great network. He's a guy, I was fortunate enough to meet some great people in career transition, have become extremely well-connected friends beyond just that mutual connection where Lenny talks about givers and sharers, right? It becomes a relationship over a period of time. And that's truly what networking is all about. It's not a one and done thing. So thank you, Lenny.
The next episode will be on the 17th as we continue the first and third Saturday of the month. And we'll talk about differentiating yourself. We'll talk about determining where you want to be after you've kind of conducted an assessment of exactly where you are today. And we'll talk about developing a plan to get you there. But then the final phase, probably even most important, communicating and executing. But George, you've got a pretty neat event coming up soon.
Yeah, really excited about this. It's all coming together in the last couple of weeks. So about 3 months ago, I kind of thought about, with that in mind, there's a lot of people contemplating a change in their career. It doesn't necessarily have to be career transition per se, but this is an opportunity for helping those people also get the best of the best that I consider the best of the best. Starting off with Kat Breet on career, where are you at if you're in career transition, if you're contemplating really kind of developing a roadmap, and you need to understand, before you kind of go out there branding, who knows it best than Kathleen Crandall. And then, if you're looking to do that pivot and say, hey, I'm going to go out and hang my own shingle, we got John Arms, who's the gig master person out there. And then we close it up with making sure that your LinkedIn is solid and it's bringing the right traffic with Ann Pryor. And then I'll close the session with, networking, right? What I've learned over all these people and many, many more in my 2 transitions the last 5 years. It's a process, it's in a map. And this symposium is really geared to help people, whether where they're at in their career, if they're in a job, or if they're in a transition. It's really setting your next 20 years to be the best 20 years yet. So hopefully people sign up by April 9th. I get a big discount on that. And we've got already a lot of momentum going.
Oh, that's great. And rhodium is a transition metal, so it's kind of a transition element. So that's kind of a great a tie-in there as well. For again, our viewers, we covered a lot today. If you enjoyed this topic, we really just scratched the surface. And for more detailed information on this, as well as other topics related to job search, pick up a copy of George's new book, Hired: Cut Your Career Search Time in Half. If you know someone in transition, or perhaps you yourself are in job search, you need to order a copy of this book. It's a great reference guide that you can refer back to and keep on your bedside table to review each night. But don't take my word for it. On Amazon alone, there's over 50 reviews. So check them out, make a decision. But I'm telling you, if you want to be hired, you need to buy Hired. It's available from Kirkhouse Publishing. That may be the quickest way to receive a copy, actually. Great people at Kirkhouse, but also can order on Amazon. And if you just cannot wait for the shipment to get to your doorstep, you can get the electronic version on Kindle Unlimited. However you get your hands on a copy, you will be glad you did. Thanks for spending another Saturday morning with us, and we look forward to you sharing with your coffee with George and Phil.
Hey, happy Easter, Phil and viewers. Guys, be blessed.
Have a great weekend, guys.